My name is Lorraine Pruitt, and at 68 my son decided I'd gotten too foggy to be trusted with my own money. He didn't say it like that. Nobody ever does. He said it over pot roast at my own dining room table, with his wife nodding beside him and a manila folder resting by his elbow like it had been invited too. "We just want to protect you, Mom." Then he slid a form across the table, turned to face me, a pen laid diagonally across the top the way a waiter lays down a check. Durable power of attorney, my name already typed at the top. Here's the thing they were all so sure of that night. They thought they knew whose house we were eating dinner in. They were wrong about that, and the folder by my son's elbow wasn't even the worst thing in the room. I set down my fork. I let the kitchen clock do the talking for a second. Then I said one quiet sentence that took the legs out from under every plan they'd built without asking me. "Welcome to Strong Mom Stories, where the women everybody learned to talk over finally get the last clear word. If any piece of this starts to feel like your own kitchen table, then you're exactly the person I'm telling it to. Leave a comment and tell me what state you're watching from. And do me a favor and subscribe, because this gets better the further in we go. Let me tell you who I am, so the rest of it lands the way it should. I spent 30 years as an insurance fraud investigator, auto, property, life, the ugly ones. My whole career was sitting across from people who'd practiced their story in the mirror and finding the one thread that didn't hold. Bank statements, timelines, signatures, the little gaps where the math stops being sentimental and starts telling the truth. My husband, Hal, used to call me his lie detector with reading glasses. He died of a heart attack at 53, on an ordinary Sunday, halfway through changing the oil in the truck. I was 50. After that, I stopped expecting life to warn me about anything, so I built the rest of it on my own. I kept my job, I rolled my pension and my 401(n) into a careful little setup that a good advisor and I checked every spring. I paid this house off the year I turned 60. I am not a rich woman, but I am a thorough one, and there is a difference my family kept forgetting. Lately, they'd taken to talking about me in that soft, careful voice people use on a dog that bites. Mom's repeating herself. Mom got confused at the pharmacy. Mom doesn't understand the internet. I understand the internet fine. I just stopped explaining myself to people who'd already filed their verdict. I kept one line taped inside my desk drawer for 25 years. People forget what they said. Paper doesn't. I never thought I'd need it at my own dinner table. I was about to, because the son sliding that form across the linen had no idea that the roof over his head was the one piece of paper he should have read first, and I'd spent 14 years saying nothing about it, because I thought silence was a kind of generosity. That was my mistake. Not pride. I just trusted quiet to do a job that only words can do. The dinner was my daughter-in-law's idea, which should have been my first flag. She does not cook for me. She attends, she comments on the salt, she leaves early. So when she called and said she wanted to host a nice family night, just us, at my house, with her bringing the roast, I noticed. I notice for a living. They got there early. My son carried in the slow cooker like a peace offering and kissed my cheek the way you kiss a relative you're about to disappoint. We ate. We talked about nothing. His work, the weather, my granddaughter's new apartment across town. And then, somewhere between the roast and the pie I'd made, my daughter-in-law set her wine down and folded her hands and said, in the gentle voice, "Mom, we've been worried about you." I asked her about what. "The scam," she said, like I should already know. "The one you fell for, the gift cards." "I have never bought a gift card for a stranger in my life." I said so. "See, that's exactly it," she said, and looked at my son with this terrible, satisfied sadness. "You don't even remember." That was when he slid the folder over and opened it to the form. "It's simple, Mom. You just sign here and we handle the money side. The bills, the investments, all the stress, you won't have to worry about getting taken advantage of again." He tapped the signature line. We already had it drawn up. Right and proper. Right and proper. 2 words I'd heard in 100 fraud interviews, always from the person doing the taking. I looked at the form a long moment. Durable financial power of attorney, effective immediately, granting my son's wife full authority over my accounts, my annuity, my property. Then I looked at my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike in the church parking lot, and I said the quiet sentence. I already pulled the deed this afternoon. To the house you live in. It has one name on it, and it isn't yours. The fork in my daughter-in-law's hand actually stopped halfway to the plate. My son blinked like I'd switched the lights off and on. Mom, what are you talking about? Our house? Your address, I said. My house. Eat your pie. We'll talk when you're ready to listen instead of ready to win. I stood up and started clearing plates, hands perfectly steady, and I watched the two of them try to remember whether they'd ever actually seen a closing statement with their names on it. They left angry. I didn't slam the door. I just shut it, soft and final, and stood in the quiet with one question settling in my chest like a stone, going down a well. How does a mother end up owning the houses her son calls home and never once tell him why? The answer was in an accordion folder on the top shelf of my hall closet. But before I show you what was in it, you should understand how that house happened, because it matters for everything after. 16 years ago, my son's first business went under in the worst possible way. A franchise sandwich shop, bad partner, worse loan terms. He and his wife were about to lose the little ranch house where my granddaughter was growing up. She was 11 then, and I will never forget her sitting on my back step, asking if she'd have to change schools. So I did what mothers do. I had the cash from a rental I'd sold and a clear head, and I bought their house out from under the foreclosure. I put it in my name on purpose, because his creditors were circling, and I didn't want a single one of them able to reach it. I let them stay for a rent that started small and quietly drifted to almost nothing over the years. I never made him sign a thank you. I never brought it up at Thanksgiving. I thought love was cleaner when you didn't itemize it. That was the silence I told you about. I let my son grow comfortable, believing the house was simply theirs, the way a kid believes the refrigerator fills itself. And now that same son was sitting at my table trying to get a form notarized that would let his wife empty the accounts I'd spent 30 years filling. I held that folder for a long time that night. I didn't open it, I just held it, the way you hold a tool before a hard job. The text started before I'd finished the dishes. My son. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. Then his wife, from her own phone. We love you. We're trying to help before something worse happens. Then him again. I already talked to Paige. She agrees with me. Paige is my daughter. Younger, 2 time zones away, conflict allergic since the cradle. If he'd looped her in, it wasn't to ask a question, it was to start a choir. I made myself a cup of tea and read every message twice, the way I used to read a claim file, not for the feeling but for the shape of it, and the shape told me something cold. This wasn't a son panicking. Panic is sloppy. This was tidy, not thinking clearly. Before something worse happens. Paige agrees. Those weren't worried texts, those were exhibits. Somebody was building a record, and they were lining it up neat, the way I used to line up evidence before I handed a file to the prosecutors. I'd seen exactly this happen to a woman once, on a life policies I worked years back. Her nephew started a little diary of her episodes. A missed appointment here, a confused phone call there, all written down and dated. By the time anyone looked closely, the aunt had a file 2 inches thick, describing a decline that had never actually happened, and the nephew had himself appointed to manage everything she owned. I set my phone face down on the counter, next to the folder, and felt my whole chest go quiet and clear. They didn't want me protected. They wanted me declared. By Sunday, the relatives started calling, which is how I knew the choir had its sheet music. My cousin's wife first, sticky sweet. We just want what's best, Lorraine. Marcus says you've been struggling. Struggling with what? I asked. The scam, the forgetting, the outburst at dinner. I didn't have an outburst, I said. I cleared the table. He said you accused poor Bryn of stealing. There it was, already buffed into a story. Then my brother-in-law called with the same script almost word for word, and then a woman from my church, asking ever so gently whether I'd thought about getting a little checkup, just to be safe. That word, safe, doing such heavy lifting. I understood the play completely. My daughter-in-law wasn't just bad-mouthing me. She was seating a jury, one phone call at a time, so that when the real move came, the verdict would already feel decided. And in every single call, if you listened past the worry, the same subject kept surfacing. Not my health, my accounts, my house, my annuity. Concern, it turns out, has a dollar figure if you read it close enough. Somebody out there was keeping a ledger of my incidents, and I didn't yet know whose handwriting it was in. I found out at the hardware store, of all places, picking up a furnace filter. My son was 2 aisles over on speakerphone, not bothering to keep his voice down the way he never could. "No, the capacity angle's cleaner than the financial one," he was saying. "If she's incompetent, the conservatorship handles all of it at once." A second voice answered, smooth as a closing pitch. "I've shepherded plenty of these, believe me. You get the doctor on record, the family's aligned, and the court just rubber stamps what everyone already sees. We formalize it, I manage the assets, everybody's protected." I stood very still by the furnace filters. When my son turned the corner, he nearly ran his cart into mine, and beside him was a tanned man in a slate gray sport coat with a lanyard, the kind of badge that's trying to look official. "Garrett Voss, Senior Wealth Transition Advisor." "A financial planner," the badge said. "A vulture," the haircut said. "Mom, my son recovered fast, small world." "Hilarious," I said. The man put out his hand like we were old friends. "Mrs. Pruitt, I work with families through these hard seasons. I'd love to just sit and listen." "You'd love to manage my retirement," I said. His smile didn't move a millimeter, and that's exactly how I knew he was good at it. He'd done this a dozen times to a dozen women who looked like me. My son wanted the house out from under me. His wife wanted the cash. But this man turned grief and worry into a fee schedule, and he had no shame about it at all. "Think about your family, Lorraine," Voss said soft. "I am," I said, constantly, and I rolled my cart to the register with my hands as steady as a surgeon's, while something behind my ribs went very cold and very organized. Most people who heard what I heard in that hardware store would have driven straight to their sons and made a scene. I drove to my credit union instead. 30 years of investigating fraud teaches you one reflex above all others. You don't shout about ownership, you check it. Years ago, out of pure habit, I'd put a verbal password and a callback rule on every account I had. Any large withdrawal, any change of authority, and they call me first. On a number only I answer. I asked the woman at the desk to pull my recent activity flags. She frowned at her screen and said, "Actually, Mrs. Pruitt, I'm glad you came in. We have a hold on something. Somebody submitted a power of attorney 3 days ago, trying to begin liquidating your annuity. Your callback rule caught it. We were going to phone you Monday. 3 days ago. The dinner was 4 days ago. Somebody had taken that unsigned form off my table, signed my name to it, and walked it into a financial institution, before the pie was even cold. I asked to see the document. The signature on it was a decent forgery, a real effort. But I have spent 3 decades looking at the moment a pen hesitates. The L in Lorraine started too high. The person who wrote it had practiced, but not enough. I asked the credit union to keep the hold, keep the original, and flag it as suspected fraud, and I had them print me 2 copies. They were happy to. Banks do not enjoy honoring forged authority. It is the bank's neck, too. I drove home with that printout on the seat beside me like a passenger, and I'll be honest, I had to sit in the driveway a minute. It is one thing to suspect the people you raised. It is another to hold the proof of it warm from the printer. My granddaughter came by that Thursday after her shift, still in her scrubs, eyes red. She's a hospice nurse now, the gentlest hard job there is. "Grandma, I heard them," she said before I'd even gotten the door all the way open. "Dad and Mom. I came by to drop off a casserole dish, and they didn't know I was in the hall." I poured her a glass of the lemonade she's liked since she was small, and I waited. "They have a folder," she said, and her voice shook. "Mom keeps it in the office. Pages of dates, things you supposedly did. Forgot the stove. Got lost driving. There's one that says you didn't recognize me. I asked her when I had ever once not recognized her, the girl I taught to balance a checkbook at this very table. "Never," she said, and that's when she cried. "There's worse, Grandma. They want to move fast. Dad said they have to do it before you talk to a lawyer or change any of your papers." So, there was the clock. They weren't afraid I was failing. They were afraid I was sharp. My granddaughter, bless her, was ready to march over there and burn the folder in the driveway, and I held both her hands and told her no. "This isn't your fight to carry," I said. "You raised me," she said back, like it settled the argument, and maybe it did. I asked her one thing only. "Did you see what's in the folder beyond the dated pages?" She nodded, miserable. "A petition. For conservatorship. Your name filled in. And an intake form for some assessment, with a date on it." "What date?" I asked. She told me. I had 19 days. I didn't go looking for paper before I gave my son one honest chance, because I think you owe people that, even when you already know how they'll spend it. I called him on Friday. "No wife, no relatives, no man in a gray coat. I'd like to talk," I said. "Just us, mother to son." He came over wary, sat at the kitchen table where he'd done his homework for 12 years, and didn't soften an inch. "Mom, this is happening. You're 68, you live alone, the money's complicated, and you got scammed." "I never got scammed," I said. "You don't even remember it, which is the point." "I keep my own books," I said. "I do my own taxes. I caught the forged power of attorney your wife walked into my credit union, and his face did a thing I'll remember as long as I live. It went still in the exact way a person goes still when the lie they've been telling is suddenly in the room wearing shoes." "I don't know anything about that," he said, too fast. "I know you don't," I said, "and that should scare you more than it does, because if he didn't sign it, and I didn't sign it, then his wife had forged my name without telling her own husband, and either he was lying to me or she was lying to him, and neither one was a marriage on solid ground. I told him I was not moving my money, my house, or my name anywhere. I told him no is a complete sentence, and I'd been spelling it for him in installments his whole life out of love, and I was finally going to say the whole word." He stood up. "You'll regret being stubborn," he said. "When the doctor agrees with us, you'll wish you'd cooperated." "When the doctor," I said softly, "not if." He didn't catch it. He was already getting his keys. The door shut behind him, businesslike, and I sat in the quiet he left and understood the honest chance was spent. From here on out, it would be paper against paper, and paper is the one fight I have never lost. If you've ever stood in a room while the people you raised discussed you in the third person like you were already gone, drop one word in the comments for me. I read every single one, and if a slow, clean paperwork kind of justice is your idea of a satisfying ending, go ahead and subscribe now, because the meeting they set to corner me is where every last thing turns over. I built my plan at the kitchen table, the way I used to map out a case, in a steady hand, in order. First, a real evaluation. Not a friend, not a favor. I called a board-certified geriatrician, Dr. Reyes, and asked for the full battery, the memory tests, the judgment tests, the clock drawing, all of it, dated and signed. If they wanted to claim my mind was going, I'd hand a judge the proof it wasn't. It took an afternoon and it had no mercy in it. Numbers backward, wordless, the whole gauntlet. A week later, she slid a sealed report across her desk and read me the line that mattered. Cognition intact across all domains, no impairment. "I'd say that to a courtroom," she told me. "You may have to," I said. Second, I locked the estate. I drove to an estate attorney I'd referred dozens of clients to over the years, a no-nonsense woman who read my whole situation in about 4 minutes and said, "They're running a capacity play, and they're sloppy about it." We built a revocable living trust and moved every asset I owned inside it, the house, the annuity, the accounts, all of it. We drew a new durable power of attorney and a healthcare directive, naming my granddaughter and my attorney jointly. Not my son, not my daughter. The two people in my life who'd ever shown up without an angle. I signed it all in a hand that didn't shake, dated and witnessed and notarized by a notary who watched me do every test of competence the law allows. By the time anyone filed anything, there'd be nothing left loose to grab. Third, the house. I let myself feel it for a minute, the weight of it, and then I called a real estate agent and listed the place my son and his family were living in. My name, my address, clean title, recorded 16 years ago at the county, no second name ever added, no lien, no transfer. I priced it to sell. While they'd been scheduling my disappearance, I started arranging theirs, legally, publicly, with their names on nothing. At the bottom of my plan, I wrote one line and underlined it twice. Stay calm. Calm is the whole case. Because here's what I knew that they kept forgetting. A loud, rattled old woman is exactly the picture their story needed. A calm one, with a folder of clean paper, breaks that picture clean in half. They could feel me getting ready. People always can, even when they can't name it. So my daughter-in-law escalated. The email went out to 20-some relatives on a Wednesday subject line, an honest update about Mom. I'll spare you most of it. The gist was that I was declining, that I'd been victimized by scammers, that I'd grown paranoid and was accusing family of stealing, and that everyone would be gathering soon to make a loving plan for my care. A loving plan for me, whether I wanted one or not. Within an hour, my phone filled with replies I wasn't even on, forwarded to me by my granddaughter. "So sorry, you're such a devoted daughter-in-law. Let us know how to help." One cousin wrote, "Lorraine always was difficult. Difficult. Yes, I paid off a house being difficult." Then came the call I knew would come. My daughter, Paige, finally weighing in from her safe distance. "Mom, I don't want to take sides." Which is what a person says when they've already taken one. Bryn, she's just overwhelmed. Everybody wants the same thing. "Which thing is that?" I asked. "The one with my hospital intake form already filled out." Silence on the line. She hadn't known that part, or she had and didn't want to. "There's going to be a family meeting," she finally said. "At your house, Sunday. They think if everyone's there, you'll see reason." "Oh, I'll be there," I said. I wouldn't miss it for the world. A meeting, an audience. Everyone they'd recruited all in one room. She thought she was building a courtroom. She was building my stage. I want to be fair to my son, even now, so let me tell you what my granddaughter brought me a few days before, because she notices things the way I do. A second envelope had slipped out of that folder when nobody meant to leave loose. A notice of default. A home equity line of credit, $90,000, drawn against a property they'd sold 2 years back and rolled into a new mortgage they were already 3 months behind on. Underneath it, a dissolved business filing. My son's second venture, gone, taking their savings down with it. They weren't comfortable people scheming for more. They were drowning, and they'd looked around for the nearest thing big enough to grab. A paid-off house and a tidy annuity belonging to a 68-year-old woman they'd already decided was on her way out. And under that was the older ache. 16 years ago, I'd already pulled my son out of the water once. With that very house, he never had to learn to swim. So when the water rose again, he didn't reach for a budget or a second job. He reached for me, the way he always had. Except this time, reaching for me meant reaching right past me into my accounts. I understood it. I even hurt over it. The scared young father on my back step had grown into a man who couldn't tell the difference anymore between being rescued and being owed. But understanding a thing is not the same as allowing it. I sat with that default notice a long while, and I'll admit the old reflex stirred. The one that says quietly, pay it off, fix it, make the fear go away. I'd done it his whole life. Then I set it down. That reflex was the exact road that brought us here. The most loving thing I had left to do was stop catching him. Saturday night, I laid everything out on the dining table and packed it the way I'd want a stranger to find it, in order, clean, undeniable. The deed to the house, one name. The brand new listing, my name, the photographs of the kitchen where my granddaughter learned her times tables. Dr. Reyes's sealed report, the trust documents, and the new power of attorney. The forged power of attorney from the credit union, paper-clipped to the fraud-hold printout, the L that started too high circled once in pencil. And the default notice and the dissolved business filing, because the truth about who actually needed looking after was right there in black and white. On top of all of it, last I set a photograph. My son at 30, my granddaughter at 11 on his hip, standing in the doorway of that ranch house the day I closed on it, both of them red-eyed and laughing because they finally had a door nobody could take. I took that picture. I remembered the relief in my own chest like it was an hour ago. I slid it all into Hal's old leather portfolio, the one he carried to work for 20 years, and I set it by the front door so I couldn't forget it, as if I could. Then I went to bed and, to my own surprise, slept like a woman with nothing to hide. They filled my living room Sunday at 2 like they already held the lease. My son, his wife, my daughter flown in, 3 cousins, the church friend, and Garrett Voss in a sport coat, the color of weak coffee, a leather binder of his own balanced on his knee. I made a pot of coffee. I set out the good cookies. I let them get comfortable, because comfortable people get careless. "Mom, sit down," my daughter-in-law said, taking my own chair. "We need to have a real talk." I sat on the sofa with the portfolio beside me, lid closed. My granddaughter stood by the window. I'd asked her to stay there and say nothing unless she wanted to. Just be a witness. Voss led, of course. Smooth voice practiced sorrow. "Mrs. Pruitt, your family loves you very much, and they're frightened for your safety and your judgment. We've prepared some documents to make this simple." He laid a fresh form on my coffee table, a pen across the top, pointing at me. "A voluntary conservatorship consent and a financial authorization. Just your signature, and everyone can stop worrying." "Sign it, Mom," my son said, his voice cracking somewhere between an order and a plea. "Please, before this gets ugly." And his wife added, soft, "We don't want to have to let the court decide whether you're competent." The room went quiet, and they all thought the quiet meant they'd won. "I'm not signing anything today," I said, and I watched myself notice that my hand on my knee was perfectly still. After all those years of going along, the one time it counted, I didn't shake at all. But since everyone's here, let's make that loving plan together. And I reached for the portfolio. "Before I open this," I said, on my palm on the lid, "I want to be fair. Every one of you got one version of this story. You all answered her email. You all drove over to help me see sense. So let me give you the other version, not in an email. Right here, where you can read it with your own eyes and decide for yourselves who in this house actually needs looking after." My daughter-in-law said, "Mom, don't make a scene." "This isn't a scene, sweetheart," I said. "It's a closing. I've done thousands." I opened the portfolio. The first thing I lifted out was the deed. "Let's start with the address," I said, and I read it aloud, level and clear. "Grantee, Lorraine Pruitt, recorded 16 years ago. No transfers. No second name. Not ever. That's the house my son has called his for 16 years. It has never, not for a single day, been in his name, because I bought it to save it from his creditors, and I never asked him to thank me." His wife's mouth opened and nothing came out. I set down the deed and lifted the listing. "Same house, on the market this week, legally, by its owner, me. As of Friday afternoon, it has an offer. Full asking, all cash, 30-day close." A cousin gasped. My son sat down hard, like his knees had quit. "While you were touring a place to put me," I said, "I was arranging where you'd be living come the 1st. Next, the sealed report." I held it up. "A full cognitive evaluation, 10 days old, signed by a board-certified geriatrician. Cognition intact across all domains. No impairment." I looked straight at Garrett Voss. "Your whole capacity case is one sheet of paper, Mr. Voss. So is mine. The difference is, mine has a doctor's signature, and yours has a date you penciled in." Then the credit union packet. I let it sit in my hand a moment. "This," I said, "is a durable power of attorney somebody submitted to my credit union 3 days after that dinner, trying to begin draining my annuity. My name is signed at the bottom. I didn't sign it. The bank's fraud hold caught it, because I've kept a callback rule on my accounts for 20 years, the kind a careful person keeps." I set it on the table, the forged signature face up, the L circled. Whoever wrote this practiced. Just not enough. The room had gone the kind of silent you can hear. My daughter-in-law's face had drained to the color of the napkins. My son was staring at his wife now, not at me. That was the moment the jury she'd seated quietly switched benches. That's the thing about an audience. You can borrow one, but you can't keep it. The second a calmer, clearer story walks in, the crowd slides over to it, and they never tell the loud one they've gone. I lifted the last of it. "And this," I said, "is the default notice on your home equity line, $90,000, 3 months behind, and the filing that closed your second business. I'm not reading these to shame anyone. I'm reading them so this room understands the truth. You didn't come here worried that I was failing. You came here desperate, and you went looking for the nearest thing solid enough to hold you up, and you decided it was me." I folded my hands on the leather lid. "You can't put away the woman who owns the room, and you can't manage the money of a woman the law won't let you touch. Every asset I have went into a trust 2 weeks ago while you were filling in my intake form. Then I did the thing I dreaded most. I reached for the photograph and I turned it around so the whole room could see it. My son at 30, my granddaughter at 11 on his hip, that doorway, both of them crying and laughing the day I bought back their roof. Look at this before you say one more word, I said. I bought that house so no creditor could take the floor out from under your daughter. I put it in my name so no court of theirs could reach it. I never made you say thank you, and I never reminded you, and I told myself that was the higher kind of love. My voice stayed level, the way I'd promised it would. You took the safety I built you, and you used it as the blueprint to lock me away. Worry is a gift, son. You handed me a bill. My daughter-in-law broke then, but not the sorry way, the loud way. She came up off the chair, shouting that I was punishing her, that I wanted her family on the street, that this was elder abuse, and she'd sue. She'd tell a judge everything. Tell them, I said. I have a deed, a clean title, a doctor's letter, a forged power of attorney with your handwriting on it, and a fraud hold from the bank. Bring every bit of it to a judge. Please. My son didn't yell. My son did worse. He picked up his binder, smoothed his shirt, and said, flat as a shut door, we'll talk to a lawyer. And he walked out, no apology, just arithmetic. Garrett Voss was already gone. I never even heard him leave. He'd done a dozen of these. He knows the exact sound a deal makes when it dies, and he'd just heard it. My daughter sat with her hands over her face and wouldn't look at me, ashamed in the way that fixes nothing. The cousins stopped saying, it's for the best. One by one, they gathered their coats, and a few of them mumbled the embarrassed kind of sorry that comes too late to mean much, but counts for a little. My granddaughter stayed. She came and sat beside me on the sofa and put her head on my shoulder. And for the first time in 3 weeks, the house was quiet because I had chosen the quiet, not because anyone had told me to hold my tongue. The house sold on the 1st. The young family who bought it has a little boy who, the agent told me, ran straight to the backyard and claimed the maple tree. My son's $90,000 credit line stayed his problem, and without my house to raid, he and his wife faced it the ordinary way and moved into a rented apartment with both their names on the lease. The conservatorship petition was never filed. You don't bring a capacity case against a woman holding a clean neuropsych report and a forged signature she can prove she didn't write. Garrett Voss evaporated. No fee, no case, no coffee-colored coat at my door again. A handful of relatives called to apologize, and I accepted, and I quietly noted the ones who never did. My daughter sends careful little texts now. My son sent 3 lines. Weeks later, he was sorry it got so heated. Not sorry he'd done it. Sorry it got loud. I wrote back 2 words. I understand. We talk a little now, slowly, the way you test ice. I took the new power of attorney and the deed and that photograph and put them back in Hal's leather portfolio where the safe things live, and I set it on the high shelf, and the closet door swung shut the soft way it always has. The house was mine. It always had been. Worry is a gift, not an invoice, not a verdict, and never a key to your mother's front door. So if you've got a folder of your own somewhere, full of the quiet kindnesses you never itemized, do yourself one favor this week and check whose name is actually on what. Then drop a comment and tell me you did it. Give this a like so the next tired woman finds it, and I'll see you in the next one.